Okay, hello everyone. We're happy to welcome SIECUS here today to our rapid response room. And we're welcoming Alison Macklin, who is the Policy and Advocacy Director at SIECUS, Sex Ed for Social Change. She is a national leader in the comprehensive sex education field for over 19 years. She is an adjunct professor at the University of Denver Graduate School of Social Work and author of the internationally published book, Making Sense of It, A Guide to Sex for Teens and Their Parents Too. In 2019, she helped author and pass Colorado's Youth Wellness Act, ensuring young people in that state are able to access inclusive, comprehensive sex education. We're also happy to have Miranda Estes. She serves as the State Policy Action Manager. At SIECUS, she spearheads the Sexuality Education Policy Action Council, CPAC, which curates space for member organizations to gather, share, and develop valuable advocacy, coalition building, and legislative strategy skills. Miranda is a vocal sexual and reproductive health advocate, former community organizer, and proud Mississippian currently residing in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're happy that she's graciously agreed to do some testimony during Georgia's legislative session. So thank you both for being here today, as well as your colleague. And I will pass it over to you.
Yeah, so as I was saying, we have over 30 years of research that shows that sex education, when it's taught according to the scaffolding formats, meaning, basic skills that are built on, just like math. So you teach addition, and first you teach numbers, right? You teach this is what a 1 looks like, 2 looks like, and then obviously you add on to that till you're in high school and you're learning things like calculus and what have you. So that's the same approach that sex education should be taken. So we work to advance sex education, which also means in any way, so meeting states where they are. So some states are really ready for these like grandiose, beautiful, utopian sex education mandates, and those have been successful. Other states, we are working on just incorporating, like in Georgia this year, incorporating some better language that's encapsulating the medical accuracy needed and scientific accuracy needed within the sex education curriculum. So that means we also support safe and inclusive classrooms. So making sure that all students feel safe, feel validated, and feel like they have the opportunity to be their true selves and learn, which means, of course, supporting LGBTQIA plus rights and ensuring access to reproductive and gender affirming healthcare. So want to make sure that if we're teaching about how to get contraception, we're actually also then helping to connect the dots and making sure that a young person is getting that contraception if they want it. And then, of course, we are fighting back against the deluge of legislation designed to restrict access to education and basic human rights. Sex education really is social change. So as I was saying earlier, over 30 years of research, we know that the National Sex Education Standards gives young people age-appropriate, medically accurate information without shame or judgment, and it sets students up for success in their lives and relationships. It demonstrates that comprehensive sex education can help young people not only delay sexual initiation, but then when they are being sexually active, reduce their risks for unintended pregnancy, sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, improve communication skills, understand the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships, and support the concepts of mutual respect and bodily autonomy. Sex education empowers young people to grow into healthy, well-adjusted adults and learn respect and compassion for all people, including those who are different from them. Currently in the United States, we have this patchwork approach of how we're dealing with sex education. So as of today, the Department of Education has dictated, the Federal Department of Education has really pushed has put forward some standards for learning, but really has pushed this down to the states. So it's really a local control issue. And that's why it's so critically important that for policy change to happen at the state level for sex education. Um, we know that in a world where people's identities are being questioned or access to services and rights are being questioned, it's more important now, more than ever before, that we put in policies and stopgap measures at the state level to really ensure that young people are getting the education that they deserve. And so, you know, you probably all know this, but we have what's called the learning standards that the board or Department of Education at the state level create. A lot of times, and the majority of states also have that existing for physical education and health curriculum, which would include sex education. So a policy component really then solidifies that and helps to ensure that the standards at the state level are being enforced. It gives us that little bit more of enforcement oomph, if you will, to really make sure that young people and there's a recourse for young people if they aren't getting that access to that information. um, and so, excuse me. So what we firmly believe at SIECUS is that a sex education shouldn't depend on where you live or what zip code you're in. It really needs to be something that's a universal experience, that all people are getting this universal basic information. Just like everybody's learning how to count, just like it's important for everybody to learn how to read, it's really important for young people to have this in the school setting. So by changing the policy in your state, you can then help eliminate barriers to access and ensure young people are getting the information they need from expert educators, people who are actually trained and know what's age appropriate and know the right messages and information to be giving to young people. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miranda, who's going to let you know a little bit about what we're seeing.
Yeah, no, thank you, Allison, for laying that framework for me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our trend breakdown, but the first thing that I have to mention, I would be remiss to not mention, our colleague and senior policy analyst, Nawal Umar, is here with us. And Nawal, I would love for you to drop our most recent publication, the 2025 Legislative Look Ahead. That's where I pulled most of this content from. But if you want a more, this is kind of like the too long didn't read version, but we would love for you to read that and see what we're anticipating for the next year. So to start off, to set the stage of like what we're seeing already in 2025 and working on and against, it's important to look at what happened in 2024. So in 2024, we saw a lot of victories and setbacks when it came to sex education policy. So SIECUS tracked over 1,000 bills last session. And good news, there was an 18% decrease in regressive legislation as compared to 2023, but some definitely slipped through the cracks. But to stay on positive first, last year in California, our two really icon states last year was Minnesota and California. California passing comprehensive menstrual health education in all schools. So that was the Know Your Period Act, or Assembly Bill 2229. And then in Minnesota, they passed House File 5237, which required the Commissioner of Education to update their really outdated health standards. I think it had been like 14 years since those had been reviewed. However, a lot of restrictive legislation, really harmful and hateful bills did pass. Which is not just us at SIECUS, not a comprehensive overlook of like the amount of bills, but we tracked 77 bills that specifically attempted to ban or restrict gender affirming care, particularly for transgender youth, which has seemed to be a target in the last few years. These bills were primarily like targeting puberty blockers and hormone therapy. And one bill that did pass last year was in Tennessee, Senate Bill 1971, which not only banned those things, but also criminalized anyone who assisted minors in obtaining like an abortion or gender affirming care, health care. So really dark. But also, I'm not going to speak too long on this. We're all state people or state policy folks, and I am a state policy girl. But I just want to say last year, preparing for Project 2025 kept us all a little bit on edge. But I just want to say here that the threats that are outlined and promised in that manifesto have already been happening in a lot of states, like states, especially in the South and in Republican-led majorities. Like those states have already been the testing grounds for the things that they are trying to implement currently. Again, like I said, Nawal's going to drop the legislative look ahead. Would love for y'all to look into that. And if you see to the right, our legislative trends. So some of the things we've been noticing for the past few years and are continuing to track are just attempts to restrict or redefine what sex education is, content censorship, and like sweeping parental rights legislation, attacks to LGBTQIA youth, weakening protections for educators and increasing their workload. And then in a positive note, we have seen some expansion of comprehensive health education or sex education. And let me, next slide. So to keep us going on our trends, whenever I said attempts to restrict or redefine what sex ed is, my arch nemesis, our arch nemesis at SIECUS is baby Olivia. If y'all are not familiar, I have the displeasure of telling you that what we call baby Olivia bills or ultrasound viewing bills seek to require students to watch an ultrasound video as a part of human development curriculum. And if they specifically name Meet Baby Olivia, I just want everyone in this room, if you're not already aware, that is a video created by an anti-abortion extremist group, Live Action. We have, Nawal's going to drop our up-to-date tracker. We're tracking all these bills, and we have talking points and background already developed. So alongside that, just to give a little like crumb of information, viewing an ultrasound or like a baby Olivia bill is really deceptive legislation. Mandating teaching reproduction and fetal development as early as third grade. While this might seem harmless, and definitely like with SIECUS, like we do promote K through 12 comprehensive sex education. However, it's not harmless where these states are passing and where it's been introduced, because it's mostly states where these topics would be taught in isolation. So as Alison mentioned, the scaffold approach to sex education, we're not talking about sex. Like there's no conversation of how reproduction happens. And to show this video in 5th grade when there's been no conversation, just a little without context or essential like reproductive health education, it's just another like tactic to spread fear, misinformation, and it kind of indoctrinates young students into viewing women primarily as childbearing vessels rather than a comprehensive, empowering, helpful sex education. So right now in 2025, we've already seen 25 bills across 15 states, and that's growing weekly. Happy to share, again, Nawal's going to share the tracker. I would love for y'all to check it out. But to skip out of baby Olivia and into the next topic, so much of what sex education is has started to be, the opposition has started to label as obscene or explicit. And they've actually found some success in doing this. But basically what they're trying to do is restrict sex education as well as instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity. So think about like the Don't Say Gay bills that we're seeing, or like Don't Say Gay-esque type bills, pronoun bans. It's just saying that like it's marking certain identities as explicit and obscene, and tamping down teachers' ability to talk about those things. Speaking of what teachers can and can't talk about, we know the word of the moment is DEI, and there's been a lot of DEI and sexual orientation, gender identity, SOGI book bans. So very negative trend. Just general censorship and content censorship has been has been successful, and they're feeling emboldened by this administration. Next is something that we have like more recently started to pay attention to, which is affirmative defense, attacks to affirmative defense for teachers. So the affirmative defense like protects educators from legal penalties when they teach mandated or approved curricula um, regarding sexual health, reproductive rights, LGBTQ issues, anything. But states like Texas right now has multiple bills that are trying to remove the educational protection from teachers. So saying even if you were teaching it just to be educational, now you're leaving teachers, if that passes, it would lead teachers at risk to be sued, to be fired, to have their license revoked, etc. And I just want to say that like these bans and censorship, content censorship, are all just to make teachers feel like they must self-censor or limit an educator's ability to provide fact-based, medically accurate, inclusive sex education. This would silence conversations, erase LGBTQ identities in the classroom, and really harm young people's access to essential health knowledge. And I know I just said a lot, so I don't want to, that's what we're seeing negatively. More positively, we are seeing some pursuit of like menstrual equity education and product distribution. I can't talk. In bathrooms, and that's great and incredible. It's like so is having like consent education, assault and violence prevention education, and thanks to New Jersey last year kicking off the ban on book bans with the Freedom to Read Act. I don't want to be like, we must dwell on the negative. Unfortunately, though, it does seem that way. And recently that we are doing more work to like beat back bad bills than we are having luck progressing really good ones. But I wanted y'all to know that there are some progressive things being worked on. So next, I just want to say like how we at SIECUS could work together with lawmakers and offices across the country. Like we already said, first things first, if baby Olivia comes up in your state, we would love to hear from you. We would love to support you and support anyone on the ground. But that's not just specifically for baby Olivia. We also have model legislation through our policy playbook, which is a look at some good bills that could be passed to progress sex education at the local level. We're also able to help with crafting amendment and testimony language, and of course, evidence-based talking points. And Alison already mentioned it, but we are happy to talk anytime about the National Sex Ed Standards and what that actually requires of good sex ed. Next, as it was mentioned in my bio, I oversee our Sexuality Education Policy Action Council, or SAPAC, and that is just a group of members who are really dedicated to progressing sex education and also fighting back against bad legislation. We have members in about 30 states currently. So if ever you want to be connected with some of our state partners, to be engaged in ground level advocacy or working directly with state partners, I do recognize sometimes state lawmaker offices would rather work with someone in the state. We do have connections, would love to make those connections. And lastly, we bill track. We're tracking all 50 states. We monitor bill movement, and we can analyze trends like the report we put out. We put out the mid-year report, so that'll be the next thing you see from us. But in the meantime, if you're ever just like, what's going on in the sex ed sphere, we would love to chat and make ourselves available for you. We want to support you. We have y'all's backs. We have folks who want to work with you. And if you ever need analysis on sex ed bills, we'd love for you to stay in touch. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Alison, to wrap us up.
Great. Sorry, I needed to find my my mute button there. Yeah, thanks so much, Miranda. So, we've got a long road ahead of us for sure. Sessions are, some of them are, in full swing. Some of them are just getting started. We know that SIECUS is not going anywhere, and we are here and we will be steadfast and strong as we fight for social justice and sexual and reproductive rights. We've been around for 60 years. We don't plan to go anywhere. And so we will be here to support you. And you're welcome to reach out to us for strategy questions, policy questions, to think through ideas, messaging, all of the things. And I just ask you to remember that sex education is resistance.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful.